In recent years, Uber has expanded into food and item deliveries, as well as ride-sharing with Uber Pool and Uber Commute. A class action lawsuit over the classification of drivers as contractors instead of employees is ongoing. The company is also facing stiff competition and opposition from some of its drivers who have objected to a recent price drop in major cities. I am pleased to have Travis at this table for the first time. Welcome.
Yes.
Here we go. This is Fast Company Innovation by Design 2015, so it's a year ago. A $50 billion valuation, a legion of enemies, how CEO Travis Kalanick plans to keep the magic going. Admit it, you love Uber. People seem to love Uber. What is it that makes them love Uber?
Well, we didn't realize it, but it's actually really hard to get around.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people either get used to waiting for a bus, used to driving a car usually, or used to just not being able to go somewhere when they want to. It could even be like, hey, you want to go to a restaurant, but you don't know how you're going to get back because maybe you have a glass of wine or two. This is about safe, reliable transportation. No matter where you are in the world, it's 5 minutes away.
How did you start it?
Well, I was with my co-founder. We were in Paris, and we couldn't get a taxi. And anybody who's been out late in Paris knows, like, it's very likely you're going to be walking back to your hotel if you're a visitor or walking back home if you live there. And we just wanted to push a button and get a ride. And it was actually my co-founder. He's like, I want to push a button and get a ride. And I'm like, that sounds like an amazing thing. Let's go do that. And we went back to San Francisco, and then we started working on it.
You had been a serial entrepreneur before that.
Yeah, I mean,
with success and failure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I've been an entrepreneur since I got out of high school, and have seen all the different sort of trials and tribulations of an entrepreneur. But I guess my approach is on the failure side of it is that it's just like, yeah, you're going to get knocked down, but you just find a way to keep getting back up, and it doesn't feel like failure. And that's why when you said failure, I was like, maybe not. But yes, I'd say definitely things that people would look at as, hey, failures of some kind or another. But if you just keep getting back up and you keep putting your all into it, I found that you eventually find success.
Finish this sentence for me. Uber could not have happened without?
Smartphone. Yeah, right. Uber could not have happened without a connected smartphone with data.
Someone, as you were sitting down, asked the question about lowering prices. Yeah. Very good for the consumer.
Yeah.
Perhaps not so good for the driver. But there's an answer to that.
Well, look, what we found is that when prices go down, that a lot more people can use it. It becomes affordable to a lot more people. And so then you see people using it in places and at times they wouldn't before. And what that means is that when a driver drops a customer off, he can then get another request much more quickly. And so what happens is the trips per hour that driver can do when the price goes down,
volume goes up.
And so what happens is we've gone from, for instance, here in New York, we've gone from, 4 years ago, the driver was making about $19 an hour, go all the way up to $32 an hour because everything got more efficient as we moved prices down. So the driver's making more money per hour as prices go down.
How many governments have tried to prevent you from doing business?
I mean, in almost every city we are in, at some point, the incumbent industry attempts to persuade the government to do what we would believe is the wrong thing, which is not allow competition. And so we are very pro-competition, and that's sort of the principles in which we try to engage in a city. But obviously incumbents don't always want that competition.
There's also the question of drivers being employees versus being private contractors. As of today, they continue to be private contractors.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, look, the way to think about this, it kind of starts with, how the independent contractor thing works, not just here in the U.S., but around the world. Over 90% of the taxi drivers in the United States are independent contractors today, right? But those taxi drivers have shifts, like lot of cases, it's 12-hour
But
shifts.
do they get medical benefits and things like that?
No, they're independent contractors. So they have shifts, and they have, and it's not their equipment, it's not their car, and they have lots of rules around how they do business. In the Uber world, there are no shifts. You just work when you want and stop working when you want. And of course, it's your car, so it's just really your business. So we feel like the independence that drivers have on our platform is pretty clear. And then it's just about the political discussion about, as a community, making sure that the labor side of the equation is getting a good or fair deal.
This is a sharing economy. Airbnb is part of the sharing economy. What else is vulnerable or open or possibly changing because of a sharing economy?
Well, look, I like to think of it, at least where the world that Uber is in on-demand economy. And like I said, you push a button, you get a ride. That's how we feel as consumers. But on the labor side, pushing a button and starting work, pushing a button and stopping work, that flexibility in work is, I think, the real breakthrough in what I call the on-demand economy. And I think that
you can shape your own hours.
You literally have control of your time, which there's very little work in the world that allows for that. And that's a true breakthrough when you can do it at scale, when you're talking about millions of people who now can work on their own time when they choose and not when they don't.
Are you in a hurry to do something? And I mean by that, people talk about you, and they believe that you're trying to rise to higher and higher levels of scale because it means something to you.
Sure.
But you have developed this, at least, profile of a young man in a hurry. I mean,
well, look, with
all the rough elbows that suggest.
I think it's how should I put it? We look at all of the cities and the hundreds of millions or billions of people that live in cities around the world, and we know that the transportation systems there are just they're not serving everybody's needs. I mean, even here in New York with a great mass transit system, there's still 2.5 million cars going over those bridges every day. And so we just believe we can help the city do better. I guess most successful entrepreneurs are not waiting
for it to come to them,
for success and not waiting for progress. We are generally a little bit forward-leaning when it comes to trying to make progress happen.
Well, you become, I think, in love with the idea that you have been part of, and you can't wait to push the edges of what that is.
Well, I think what it is like, for me, it's about problem solving and loving to solve problems. And so if you are passionate about solving problems, sometimes I just like to describe this as like, imagine a really great math professor with no problems to solve, right? A great math professor is somebody who wants the hardest problems, who wants to solve them and loves solving them.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so that's kind of how I feel about my work. And so it's not about a man in a hurry. It's more about really interesting problems in the world, and how do you lean into them and solve things that people maybe thought weren't even possible to solve, and that's fun. I like problems. I like problems that have
consequences.
Well, certainly that, but I think I like problems where you can fight for something that matters, where you feel like maybe there's a little bit of justice that's part of solving it.
Okay, and how would you define what matters in your case?
Well, like in Uber's case, imagine the way in which all people get around their city was constrained because somehow or another it was illegal to have alternatives. And somehow or another it became illegal for cars to be used for commercial purposes, and because of that, everybody for the last 50 years has had to buy cars, because no cars were allowed to be shared. But when you can share them,
the technology wasn't there to share. Right.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
Like if you look at the past, like the Jitney was the first. There was an Uber before there was Uber, and it was called the Jitney, and it was in the early 1900s. And it literally grew faster than Uber's grown. But very quickly, there were regulations put into effect that made it illegal for people to share cars.
When will you be profitable?
Well, it's interesting. We like I think some other tech companies, maybe even like an Amazon or something like that, where
you plan
the profits that come in, you then go and invest in the new thing. And so for us, we have, we're well over 100 cities that are profitable. But you take those profits and then you invest in either going into new cities or you invest in new technology or new kinds of businesses. Now, I don't want to do too many things. We try to keep a limited set of things that we do so that we can stay focused. But we do like to invest our profits into the new thing.
Okay, let's talk about the new things.
Yeah.
Uber Commute.
Uber Commute. So this is, well, let's start with Pool. Uber Pool is first. You push a button, car comes to you just like before, you open the door, you get in the car, and there's somebody else already in the car. Two people taking the same trip at the same time. Uber Commute is somebody's driving to work. They're not a commercial driver, and they pick you up on the way to work, and you guys just happen to be going to the same place at the same time. The cost goes way down with Uber Commute because the person is already going where they want to. They're already going to work, so the marginal cost goes down. It goes down substantially.
What are the new adventures other than Eats, Commute, Pool?
Look, something like close to a third of all of our trips are in China. That's interesting.
A third of your volume is in China.
Yes.
And what do you think it'll be by 2020?
I have
4 years.
I have no idea.
But you love thinking about it.
Yeah, for sure. What I love doing is solving the problem, right? So how do you...
Okay, so let's stop. What's solving the problem mean in China's case? The metric of demand and all of that, or China's a different place and you have to make your way around a different set of rules? What is it?
It's the latter, right? So, for instance, we have our existing system, but there's so many things that are different in China. Maps are different. Social networks are different. Payment systems are different. Government and how they work with businesses is different. And so now you got a whole new problem to solve. And sometimes it's like, it's different in this little way, but that little way, that Chinese way of doing things can change everything. And it's interesting for an entrepreneur and it's certainly for a problem solver because then you have to rethink your problem.
How will driverless cars affect your business?
Well, I think we see all of the good things that happen with human-driven transportation, like what Uber does today with people driving the cars. When you go into autonomous, I think, those benefits get bigger in many cases. But I think the biggest one is that 1 million people die a year in cars. And when you go into autonomous cars, and we know Google's been working on this since 2007, when you go into autonomous cars, the prospect is 1 million fewer people dying a year globally. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
That's a huge deal. And these are like senseless deaths that shouldn't have happened.
So how far away is that?
There's no right answer. Nobody really knows because there's still science to be solved. There's still regulatory to be solved. The point is like if you have an autonomous, if a Google autonomous vehicle is in a desert and there's no crosswalks and there's no people, well, they got that now. If there's crosswalks, they probably have it. If there's really extreme weather, well, then maybe it starts not functioning quite right. And the thing is like there's 150, there's more than that. There's hundreds of these types of problems that have to be solved one at a time in order for it to work all of the time.
Issues of people, either a driver being attacked by somebody from the back or a driver acting hysterical in terms of taking off and not stopping and running stop signs and going too fast. Yeah. How big an issue is that for you, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, look, Uber's first cultural value, our number one cultural value is celebrate the city. And what that means is everything we do is to make a city better. And so the first thing we do is we say, what can we do when we first got going, what can we do to make for the safest way to get from point A to point B? That's part one. Part two is, well, that's great, but how can we actually help to make the city safer? No city's perfect. No system's going to be perfect. But can you institute technology? Can you roll out technological systems that actually make being in an Uber or make Uber the safest place in a city? And so this is things like, well, of course, things you do before the trip even happens, making sure the right drivers get on the road and the wrong ones don't. It's making sure that, any feedback that's happening in a car, like, goes back to a centralized system, and you can deal with situations or partners, we call the driver partners, that, if there's feedback that needs to get back to them, we do. If it's an extreme situation, we take them off the system. And then there's after the ride too. And so imagine if you had a system where somebody's, and this is the kind of technology that's interesting, is when let's say somebody's accelerating faster than they should or decelerating faster than they should. Is there a way to detect that? This is the kind of future that we're trying to figure out. And if you can detect it, are there ways to prevent it? And so basically it starts with a system of accountability, and then it's technology that makes that system more and more accountable over time.
Accountability, but also sensors that can do the work of detection.
For sure.
There's been an investment from General Motors.
Mm-hmm.
A car company invests in Lyft.
That's correct.
A car company invests in Lyft.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
That makes sense to you if you're a car company?
Yeah, look, I think as transportation becomes a service, as fewer and fewer people own cars, there's going to be this software and hardware partnership. Uber and folks like Uber are the software side of things, but we're not making cars. That's not
now, not tomorrow.
No, I don't. I mean, all you have to do is go to a manufacturing floor and see cars being made, and you're like, wow, this is a whole new level. Right. And so I think there's a really natural partnership between the hardware and software side of things.
What do you worry about in the middle of the night about Uber? Is there a disruptive technology that could change the game?
Well, look, I think we basically are all about making it more convenient and bringing that convenience at a lower cost. And whoever's able to bring the most amount of convenience at the lowest cost is going to be a big winner in bringing transportation to cities.
Why did you change your image? Why did you feel like you needed a new symbol of Uber?
Yeah. Look, when we first came up with what is now the old Uber logo, right, or the old app icon, right, we were only black cars. We were a high-end service, a luxury service almost. And this was an aspiration, or it was the sort of, we were trying to show something that looked high-end and that could almost look like something that would go on the front of a very nice car. But we were only in one city when we made that. We weren't global. And it was super high-end. And so we said, look, we're now in almost 400 cities, dozens of countries around the world. We wanted to be deferential to the places that we serve. That's where the colors and the patterns come in. And by the way, you're in different countries, you get a different pattern and color on your icon.
So you need something universal.
And then, the U, we turned into something that was more universal. U doesn't mean anything in Sanskrit, and the U doesn't mean anything in Mandarin. And we wanted to have something that was more approachable. And so that was the purpose.
It's great to have you here.
Yeah, it's good to be here.